Top of the morning to you, be God, happy Jesus. I apologise to all Irish people everywhere for that. But we have a special Irish day coming up. We have St Patrick's Day, and so I'm going to do a very special pie for that. I'm going to do a beef and Guinness pie, and it's going to be wonderful. So Blowin, who lives in Ireland, suggested that I might do beef and Guinness pie for St Patrick's Day, and I agree with him totally. It's a great idea. And also Hazel Braun, who doesn't live in Ireland and I don't think is Irish, requested something Irish. So here we go, a lovely, luscious, rich beef and Guinness pie with Colcannon with kale in it. Ooh. Easy to do, wonderful, let's do it. Right, first thing we want to do is make a big beefy stew. So my ingredients are a lump of meat, that's 1 kilo of shin of beef, a can of Guinness, that's 500ml, bit of flour, 300ml of good beef stock, a couple of onions, or you know, a large one, 3 carrots, 4 sticks of celery, and a small handful of parsley, and a teaspoon of mustard, and also some salt and pepper for seasoning. So, first thing to do is sharpen the knife. Now, I'm indebted to Samuel de Geldre, I hope I pronounced that right, who pointed out in my last video, and in fact the only one where I've shown you how I sharpen a knife, that I was doing it wrong. I've been sharpening my knives wrong for decades, and so I'm glad he's pointed it out, because he's right. What you do is you get your iron, you get your knife, the pointy end away from you. I was always doing it the other way around towards me, which is not very smart and doesn't give you a very sharp knife, in fact. So just several strokes on both sides, and this knife, I've had it about 5 years, it does actually need a proper grinding. So since I shot that, I realised that I've been a bit silly. When I talked about grinding, I was thinking of a semi-industrial machine thing, where you won't have one yourself, but you go and take your knives and get them sharpened. And then I thought, hang on a minute, I've got a sharpening thing here in my shed, because I've been doing quite a lot of woodwork recently. So I've got, an oil stone, which is, it's coarse on one side, it's very fine on the other. And if it'll sharpen a plain iron or a chisel, I'm sure it can manage this. So let's have a go. Right, so I've got the coarse side of my oil stone. I've got some oil. This is actually just cooking oil, rapeseed oil. You're supposed to use special mineral oils that are quite expensive, and I haven't got any. But, well, this works. So if it works, what's wrong with it? I don't know. Right, so cover that in oil. Oh, by the way, there's 2 kinds of stones. There are wet ones that work with water, and there are oil stones that work with oil, amazingly. So what you want to do is put your knife vertically. This is just to work out the angle, because it needs to be 22 degrees. So if you've got it vertical, and then that's about 45, and then half of that again is about 22. So that's what your angle looks like. And then drag, I actually need to do it this way because I'm left-handed. Drag the entire knife blade across the stone and try and keep it all in contact with the stone while you do that, so you get a sharp edge on the entire blade. And do that 5 or 6 times on each side. Now turn it over to the smooth side, more oil, and just repeat that process. And there we are, that should be done. So you can also finish it off with your steel. Right, I reckon that could be a sharp knife. Shall we check it? Ta-da! Result. Okay, so I'm going to get this sort of silver skin off and then cut it into chunks, a couple of centimetre or just under an inch chunks. So I'm using shin of beef because it's moderately cheap, and also it's got lots of connective tissue, collagen running through it, which will, with long slow cooking, will disintegrate and leave you with a really sort of unctuous mouthfeel, as the chefs like to refer to it. So you can use any kind of stewing beef, casserole beef. I wouldn't waste money on a bit of sirloin or ribeye for this. Okay, so there's all my meat chopped up. Now I've just got some flour in this bowl. I'm going to coat the meat chunks in that. I've also got some oil heating up to sort of medium heat in the frying pan, and I'm going to just brown these off in 2 or 3 batches actually, because there's quite a lot of it. Okay, let's chuck these all in, and the idea is to get them browned all over, the usual thing. Now you can cook this in a big pan, like just a big saucepan on the stove top, and it'll take about 3.5 hours. Or you can put it in a casserole dish in the oven, and that'll also take a few hours. But as always, I'm short of time, so I'm going to do it in the pressure cooker, and that will take half an hour. So, well, about half an hour. So I'll pop all the meat chunks into the pan, the pressure cooker pan, as they're browned. So I've got all my beef browned off, and I'm going to bring that to the boil before I add anything else to the stew. So I want to add the beef stock and the magic ingredient, the Guinness. And the reason for bringing this to the boil before adding anything else is that there will be some scum comes off, and you want to skim that off, and it's easier to do if you haven't got bits of carrot and onion and things floating in it. That's all. Meanwhile, I've chopped the onions into titchy little bits, and I'm going to chop the celery and carrots into cubes, dice. Okay, there's the carrot and celery chopped up, and here's the meat bubbling and boiling, and here's the scum that we don't want. Right, so the beef is there. I can add the carrot and the celery now, but before I add the onion, I want to just chuck it in this fat and soften it, not brown it. Also, we need to chop the parsley. Obviously, you can use dried parsley if you don't have fresh. Stirry, stirry. Right, those are nice and soft, so they can go in the stew pot as well. And I'll bring that back to the boil, and we can add the bits and bobs of seasoning. So, good whack of black pepper, a teaspoon of mustard, and a pinch of salt. I'll just give that a little taste. That's okay. I'll check the seasoning again when it's fully cooked. Right, so this needs to come up to the boil. I'll whack the lid on, bring it up to pressure, and give it half an hour pressure cooker time. So unlike practically every other chef on the interwebs, I'm not using puff pastry because I think that's an abomination on a pie. Yes, I do. I'm going to do my normal hot water crust pastry. So I've got 500 grams of plain all-purpose flour, teaspoon of salt, 250 grams of lard cut into small chunks, 250 ml of water, which is boiling. So I'll just turn that down a bit because we want to melt the lard into the water, but we don't want to sort of cook it or boil it. And pop the salt into the flour, stir it in. Come on, melt. So yeah, if you've been a long time follower of my channel, you'll see I've done a lot of pies. I am Mr. Pie Man, right? And I do get very agitated and actually annoyed when people mess about with pies. And most of the videos that I've looked at on the interwebs for this beef and Guinness pie, they're not pies. They're a ceramic pot with a bit of puff pastry on top. Not a pie guy, it just isn't. Right, that's boiling, just like me. So put half of that in the flour, stir it in. I'm doing that thing again, the plastic bowl. I keep melting these things because I'm an idiot. Stirry, stirry, mixy, mixy, and you'll get to a point where you can't really mix any more flour in the bowl. So we just tip it all out and finish off mixing by hand. Of course, the professionals: Marco Pierre White, Nigella, Mary Berry, Gordon Ramsay, Jamie Oliver, people you've never heard of, will tell you to buy puff pastry from the shop, because apparently none of them know how to make it. But anyway, I'm getting mad. Tum-ti-tum. Anyway, right, so that's all nicely mixed, and I'll just wrap that in plastic film and stick it in the fridge to cool down to room temperature. Okay, there we go. Lovely, lovely stew. And what we need to do is taste it. This meat is definitely cooked, falling to bits. There we go. That's delicious. That's just perfect. Doesn't need any extra seasoning or anything. What it does need is to cool down. And if I'd managed to get this done yesterday, it would have had all night to cool, but it hasn't. So freezer beckons. Okay, I'm ready to start making the pastry case and lid, and also some decoration. Being me, I'm going to have some green shamrock leaves on the top. So I'll just take a blob of pastry, got some green food colouring, and we'll just make this pastry go green. A few years ago, for St Patrick's Day, I did make some pies with green shamrocks on, and also I made some green pies with, pastry coloured shamrocks on, and they looked disgusting. Tasted great though. There we go, a bit of green pastry, set that on one side, and wash the green stuff off. I bet somebody complains about that. They'll say, "Ugh, you've touched that with your fingers, and your fingers are green." Don't care. Right, flour on the worktop. And I'm going to make the lid first. So a bit under half of the pastry. Is it pastry yet, or is it still dough? I wonder if there's a semantic difference. I'm sure somebody will tell me. Right, roly roly. So for the lid, you want to roll out a rectangle of pastry, a bit bigger than the tin, and trim off the edges with a knife or a ruler. I'm going to make a big hole in the middle, which is ostensibly for the steam to escape. And now I've got a monster slab of pastry for the bottom, and what you want to do is roll it around the rolling pin and then unroll it into the tin and press it down into the corners. Be careful not to get any holes in it or break it, split it or crease it. And it's a good idea to get a blob of dough to press it into the corners with, so you don't damage the dough with your fingernails. Right, let's see if the filling's cool enough to use, because you don't want to put a hot or warm filling onto cool pastry. Okay, the filling's not quite cool enough, so it's back in the freezer. But meanwhile, I'll get on with making me shamrocks, which look quite interesting, quite a bit of a marbled effect there. I like that. It's like that Sage Derby cheese or something. Not deliberate, but I'm keeping it. Now, I think I want to make 4 of these. So I need to roll it quite thin. And yeah, when I did this many moons ago, I actually made a template, printed it on paper and used that to cut around. But I'm just going to wing it. There's me lovely shamrocks, and here's my nice cold pie filling. So I'm just gonna spoon it into the pastry bottom. This pie is actually quite a bit bigger than I expected. I thought I might have some of this filling left over, which would make a fantastic stew. So, there is a bit left, and I'll make that into gravy. Now, moisten the edges, and actually before I put the lid on, I'm going to stick those shamrocks onto it, because I reckon that'll be easier than trying to do it afterwards. So, water for that, and now we'll pop that onto the pie. Quickly press it down, and then trim off the excess pastry. And now crimp the top and bottom together with your thumbs. I'm making quite definite indentations in this. And then just lift up the edge so it's not in contact with the rim. And I find this makes it easier to get your pie out when you've baked it. So at this point, that could do with a rest for about half an hour in the fridge, covered in a tea towel. Oh, looking good, hey? Right, I've got the oven preheating to 160 degrees Celsius. That's a fan oven. 180 if it isn't. I've got a beaten egg with a splash of milk in it to glaze the pie with. I've got the pie. I've got a pastry brush. So I'm just going to paint the top with the glaze, but I'm going to try not to get any on the clover leaves. Shamrock leaves, sorry. Because I think, you know, the glaze goes golden brown, and I want to try and keep this green the way it is. I know it will get a bit browned around the edges, but I'll try not to encourage it to get too brown, if you know what I mean. So paint, 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 and then we'll slam that in the oven for 35 minutes to start with and see how it's going. Right, let's start making our Colcannon. So I've got some kale, fresh from our garden, and I've got some spuds, fresh from Tesco's. You can just as well use cabbage. It just happens we've got a lot of kale that needs to be eaten, and I don't like it very much. You will also want to finish it off, some butter, some single cream, some white pepper and some salt. Cream is a bit posh for this, but it's a posh event pie. If you're not using cream, you can use milk, it's fine. Got a pan of salted water coming to the boil behind me. I'm just going to peel me spuds and chop them into wee chunks. Okay, chopped up spuds in the water. So the spuds need to boil for about 10 minutes, and then we'll add the kale or cabbage, of which you need about half as much as you have potatoes. So this looks like a lot, but actually it's like spinach, it will just boil down into not very much. So this will just need about 10 minutes. Okay, those are nice and cooked. The pie is not quite browned evenly after 35 minutes, so I'm giving it another 10 minutes. So some pepper, some salt, some cream, and some butter. Give them a good old mash. So you want to mash this as smooth as you can. And actually have a wee taste. I might have overdone the salt. Never mind. Right, so I'll put a lid on that to keep it warm until the pie is ready. Right, I think we're done. Oh, let's get this baby out. Oh yeah. Oh, look at that beauty. That is, well, that is a pie fit for a saint, isn't it? I'm very pleased with the shamrocks. They're only very slightly browned. And yeah, cool. Ta-da! Right, I reckon I've earned this. Oh, that was a bit of a long slog today. We'll just let that settle a bit. So here we go. Oh, doesn't that look fantastic? I think it does. Let's get some of this lovely flavour-soaked pastry off the bottom. So the Colcannon, I just pop that into a ring and pull the ring off. Make a dimple in the top and fill it with butter. You need tons and tons of butter with Colcannon. Oh yeah, fantastic stuff. Cheers. And that's that. I hope you enjoyed it. Now please show your appreciation the usual way: likes, shares, comments, donations, patronage, anything really. Thanks for watching and see you next time.